geometry students. Today I want to talk to you about the introduction to trigonometry. And the first thing that we have to do is talk about trig ratios. So in this video, I'm going to introduce the 3 basic trig ratios. Then in the next video, I'll show you how to use trigonometry to find missing side lengths of right triangles. In the following video after that, I'll show you how to use trigonometry to find missing angle measurements. And then I actually made an extra video following that on snazzier problems, more challenging problems. So through it all, we're going to keep calm and love trigonometry. I think you're going to enjoy this. Before we go any further, you need to get out your TI Inspire calculators and find the trig button. And I also want to make sure that your settings are in degrees. So go to Settings, Document Settings, and then make sure where it says angle that you've chosen degree instead of radians. You can measure an angle in radians or degrees, but in this course, we're only going to measure the angles in degrees. And then you can click Make It Your Default, and you should not have to do this again. It should be all set. So now that you've done that and your calculator is set in degrees, let's play with your calculator. Hit the trig button, choose sine on the top row, and then enter 34, and then hit the blue button, control, before you hit enter, and that will give you an approximation. And make sure you get this decimal. If not, go back and make sure your settings are in degrees. Next, hit the trig button, enter cosine, and then 72, control, enter, and see what decimal approximation you get. You should get this decimal number. And finally, hit the trig button, enter tangent 25, and make sure you get this, this decimal. Oops. So now the next thing I have to talk to you about is that for trigonometry, when we're doing right triangle trigonometry, the angle whose perspective we're talking about in that moment is very important. So look at angle A. If you are angle A and you're sitting in this triangle and you're looking inside the triangle, notice that that leg is opposite you. You don't touch it. And this leg is adjacent to you, right next to you, touching you. In fact, the adjacent leg is one of the sides of angle A. Remember, our legs are the sides that shoot out of the right angle, and the hypotenuse is the side across from the right angle. Now notice if you were angle B, you'd have the very different perspective. B would be opposite and A would be adjacent. But from A's perspective, this drawing is written from A's perspective. That's important when we talk about our basic trig ratios. So the first one I want to talk to you about is the sine of an angle. The sine of an angle, that decimal number you'd get if you punch that into the calculator, if you knew the angle, is the same decimal you'd get if you take the length of the side, the leg opposite that angle, and divide it by the hypotenuse of the right triangle you're talking about. The cosine of an angle, that decimal you'd get, is the same decimal you'd get if you take the length of the adjacent leg, the leg adjacent to that angle, and divide it by the length of the hypotenuse in the right triangle you're talking about. And finally, the tangent of an angle is equal to the length of the opposite leg, the leg opposite that angle, divided by the length of the adjacent leg, the length of the leg right next to that angle. And these are the 3 trig ratios we'll be talking about in this course. So before you do anything else, pause and either take a screenshot or write down these ratios. And you hopefully will remember them by accident. A way that it might be a catchy way to remember it is SOH-CAH-TOA, SOH-CAH-TOA. So stands for the sine of an angle equals the opposite leg divided by the hypotenuse. SOH-CAH-TOA. CA stands for the cosine of an angle equals the length of the adjacent leg over the hypotenuse. SOH-CAH-TOA equals TOA. Your toes are on your legs. The tangent is the only one that only involves legs. So the tangent of an angle is the opposite leg's length divided by the adjacent leg's length. So let's practice using these trig ratios, remembering SOH-CAH-TOA, SOH-CAH-TOA, to help us remember to keep it straight which one's which. So I'll model the first and let you practice the next. So first we're going to go from angle T's perspective. And if your angle T, the side GR that's 8 units long is opposite, and the side that's 15 units length, TR, is adjacent. And as always, the side across from the right angle that's 17 units, TG, is always is the hypotenuse. So the sine, sine is opposite leg over hypotenuse. So the sine from angle T's perspective is opposite 8 over hypotenuse 17. The cosine, cosine is adjacent leg over hypotenuse. The cosine from angle T is adjacent over hypotenuse, 15 over 17. And the tangent, TOA, tangent, opposite leg over adjacent leg. The tangent from angle T's perspective is opposite 8 over adjacent 15. So now you pause the video and you find the trig ratios from angle G's perspective in this triangle. And then press play for the solution. Sine is opposite 15 over hypotenuse 17. Cosine is adjacent 8 over hypotenuse 17. Tangent is opposite over adjacent. So pause, and now you on your own paper practice and find all the ratios for first from D's perspective, then from E's perspective, and this time remember, if you can reduce a fraction, reduce it. Sine is opposite over hypotenuse, and you reduce. Cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse, and reduce. Tangent is opposite over adjacent, and then reduce. And then from angle E's perspective, opposite, adjacent, and hypotenuse. So the sine from E is opposite 5 over hypotenuse 10, and reduce. Cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse, and reduce. Tangent is opposite 5 over adjacent. Now this one's a little different because you're not allowed to have a radical in the denominator, so you can use your calculator to get a decimal approximation, or you could rationalize your denominator if you'd like. And that's it for basic trig ratios. So I'll leave you with this kitten and wish you a lovely day.